Derik Queen will be the best freshman in the Big Ten.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you guys all for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So this might be a take that a lot of people don't agree with, but I think that Derik Queen is the best freshman coming into the Big Ten. According to the rankings, according to the national rankings, Derik Queen is ranked as the third best player coming into the Big Ten. He's ranked as the 12th best player in the entire class. But I'm going to tell you guys that I think that he is the best player in the 2024 class that is coming into the Big Ten. And a lot of people aren't going to like this. Specifically, Rutgers fans aren't going to like this take. But I really feel, as I've watched the game, as I watch the players, as I watch everybody in that class and get a feel for the guys that are coming into the Big Ten, the players that we're going to be playing against, I get this kind of by my eye test and just how I kind of view things in terms of being ready for college basketball. I'm not talking about NBA upside. I'm talking about day one guys that come in and make an impact. Who will have the biggest impact amongst the Big Ten freshmen? I think it will be Derik Queen. Now, some of you guys might be confused about what I'm talking about with the Rutgers thing, and I'm saying Rutgers fans might disagree with me. The thing is that Rutgers has the number 2 and the number 3 ranked player in the 2024 basketball class. They have Ace Bailey at number 2. He who is 6'8", 195, has a really good game. Don't get me wrong. A small forward, second best player in that class. Might be a top 3, 4, 5 draft pick in the NBA draft in next year's draft, not this year's draft. But then they also have the number 3rd ranked player in the class in Dylan Harper, who's a guard who is ranked 3rd in the class. Like I just said, he's from New Jersey. He's a New Jersey kid. That's a big reason why he chose Rutgers. 6'6", 210, a really good player as well. But I still give the edge to Derik Queen. And I know the rankings have Derik Queen lower than those two kids. And I know that a lot of people are going to go based off what 247 says and not what I say. But I think that when I'm talking about not potential, I'm talking about guys that walk into college and that are going to have the best college career instead of maybe not the best pro career. That's not what I'm saying, because pro versus college is a different thing. And I think Derik Queen is more built for the college game than those two guys, specifically more than Ace Bailey. I think that you could argue that the guard is a little bit more college kind of fluid and kind of ready for the college game. And Dylan Harper, I think you could argue that. But Ace Bailey, to me, is more of a guy that has a ton of potential, a ton of traits, a lot of athleticism, but he's still a little bit raw in terms of what he's going to be at the college level. And I think that he has all the potential with his size and length to be a really good player, but he's probably most likely going to be a one and done. But I think how he impacts the game in college basketball won't be the same next year that Derik Queen does. I don't think it will be the same. And I've seen Ace Bailey. I've seen some games of his. I've seen some of his highlights. I've seen kind of what he does, and he's a freak of nature. Don't get me wrong. He's more athletic than Derik Queen. He has a higher upside, I would say, than Derik Queen. But when I think about Derik Queen as a player and what Derik Queen can become as a player next year for Maryland basketball and what I saw him do at Mount Verde, I think that Derik Queen is ready right away to make an impact. First of all, Derik Queen's size, and he knows how to play the game, his IQ. I think that's the number one thing. Derik Queen arguably could have the highest IQ in that 2024 class. And that includes the guards, that includes all the Big Ten, that includes everybody in that class. I would put up Derik Queen as somebody that has the highest upside in really all of the 2024 class. And he's going to show that right away when he gets to college basketball. His IQ is going to be as high as anybody on the Maryland team already. I think when you talk about his passing ability and him being able to find the right players and him making the right play over and over again. And the thing is, it's not going to be flashy, but it's going to show up in a way that is really important. And I don't think it's going to be the same from what Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey do. I think Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are going to be less productive, but a little bit more flashy. I also think that it helps that Derik Queen has the better team around him. Rutgers, yes, we weren't good last year, but we've rebuilt this roster. And sure, Rutgers has done some things, but in terms of recruiting and everything, but I don't think Rutgers has quite the team, and they're going to be dependent on, and yes, that might allow them to have more. You would think that would allow them to have more productive years, but I think that the fact that Derik Queen's going to be playing next to Julian Reese down low, and that a lot of teams are going to be focused on Julian Reese, and they're not going to be maybe as focused. Sure, Derik Queen will be a big part of what teams do, but it's hard to play both guys well. And the fact that we have Derik Queen and Julian Reese down there, I think that opens up what Derik Queen's going to be able to do down low. And yeah, it might hurt a little bit at times in terms of the spacing, but I think that having another high-level guy, an all Big Ten type of player next to you is going to make you a lot better as a player. And I don't think Ace Bailey or Dylan Harper has that type of guy next to them to open things up. And I think that Maryland's added a lot of three-point shooting, which is going to allow Derik Queen to be a really good player down low and allow us to play through him in the post, up top, wherever he wants to play. And that's what I think that sets him apart from these between him and those Rutgers kids. I think that he's the most versatile out of all of them in terms of what he can do. There's a reason they call this kid. I've heard the comparison to Jokic. That's a big comparison that people like to make towards Derik Queen, and I have to say it makes sense. Jokic isn't a freak in nature. Jokic isn't a guy that is going to jump out of the gym like an Ace Bailey is going to do. Jokic is a guy that's going to drop 20, 10, and 10 and have a triple-double or close to it, and that's what Derik Queen is. He's going to play with high IQ. He knows how to score the ball down low. He has excellent footwork. I think his footwork is about as good as anybody on this Maryland team, probably already down low. And then you look at it, he also can pass the ball, but he also rebounds at a high level, and I think he's the best rebounder out of those three. I mean, of course, Dylan Harper's more of a guard, so I probably wouldn't consider him. But I think you could argue he's the best passer out of those three as well. I think he's the best at finishing down low. And yes, like I say, I keep saying this, Ace Bailey has a higher upside in some of the things that he can probably do at the NBA level and at the next level. But Derik Queen, I think, comes into college basketball and is more comfortable, more ready to go, is just more adjusted to what he's got to do. And I think another thing that is the reason why I believe he'll come in and be ready and he'll be the best freshman in the Big Ten is because he's been doing it at Montverde. And that's important to me. Montverde down in Florida, a basketball powerhouse, one of the best basketball program right now in all of high school basketball. Their team went undefeated. They're considered one of the best college basketball teams of all time, and he's playing next to a bunch of other Division I recruits. I don't know the exact number, but he's playing against other guys. He's playing with the number one player in the class, and Cooper Flagg, who's going to Duke, and Leah McNeely, who's going to UConn, who's number 10 when I'm looking at these rankings, and some other really good high-level Division I players. So he knows how to play with other people, but he also knows how to play against the best competition. Montverde going against each other every single day in practice, I'm sure, was probably the best competition that they got, they got into the entire year. Probably better than the gameplay that they got, probably better than the gameplay that anybody's get, because they're going against the best high school kids in the country just at Montverde. So them playing every single day, that's a college basketball team. And there's reasons why there's so many players in the NBA and that great college basketball players that end up coming from Montverde because they play against each other every single day. And iron sharpens iron. That's what they say. When you're going against great players every single day, you're going to get a lot better. And he's going to be used to the playing at that kind of level and playing at that Big Ten level, whereas I could honestly see an Ace Bailey and a Dylan Harper. They played at a high level in AAU and high school and all that type of stuff, but maybe it could be more of an adjusting period for them at times going into Rutgers and playing in the Big Ten. But overall, I just think that Derik Queen is the best freshman coming into the Big Ten this year or next year. There's a couple other kids that you could maybe put up there, but I think those are the three that are going to be looking at being the kind of Big Ten freshman of the year. You could look at Bryson Tucker, was a guy that I wanted. He's a DMV kid. He's headed to Indiana. He's got a lot of game. There's a couple of other kids, Illinois kid, Morris Johnson, who's a center, ranked 29th in the class. Michigan State has a kid, and Chase Richardson, who's a guard. He potentially could be a really good player. Purdue has a kid, and Cannon Catchings, who's a big man down low. So we'll see what happens. There's some other guys. Ohio State has a couple guys. Like, there's a couple teams that have recruited pretty well at a high level. But I do, in fact, think that Derik Queen is the best. I think he's the most pro-ready. I think he has the most diverse game. I think he has the best footwork down low. I think that he's going to be able to push the ball and push the pace in transition. And when he gets the rebound, he can just go. And I think he's a special player that Maryland's going to be happy to have. And I think he's going to be the best freshman coming into the Big Ten. And when we look at the season, I think that he has the least amount of chance to struggle compared to all the other freshmen. Of course, you're going to go through some growing pains, but I really do think that Derik Queen is the best freshman coming into the Big Ten and definitely one of the best in the country overall. What guys are we not talking about enough for Maryland football? I will talk about that after this ad from FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Guys, you have to get on FanDuel tonight. If you want to bet on the NBA and you want to bet on the Wolves and the Wolves Mavericks series and you want to bet on the Wolves to not get swept, you can do that on FanDuel. Make sure you download FanDuel. Make every playoff shot count. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So what guys are we not talking about enough for Maryland football that probably deserve more credit, deserve to be talked about more? Guys that might be able to be really high-level players this year for Maryland football, but maybe I haven't talked about them enough. Maybe I haven't heard a lot about them. But some of these guys I think that are going kind of under the radar for Maryland football because there's a couple players that we're going to talk about a lot. We're going to talk about MJ Morris a lot. We're going to talk about the couple of receivers in Ty Felton and Caden Prather. We're going to talk about Roman Hemby a lot. We're going to talk about those guys a lot. But what players are we not talking about enough for Maryland football? I have a couple of guys that potentially could make an impact next year for Maryland football that I don't think that we're talking about enough. Start on the offensive side of the ball. We'll see. Maybe I'll make the defensive side of the ball a different segment for another day. We'll see how it goes. But starting on the offensive side of the ball, I think starting at the quarterback room, I want to touch on this for a second. I think Cameron Ed, we just have started to kind of just accept the fact that we kind of assume he's not going to be the starter. And I think that a lot of that is kind of has a truth to it, but I think that we see stopped. I was talking about Cameron Edge a lot because I really believe that I felt like he's a really good player in that room, and I thought he deserved a real shot to be the starter, and I don't know if he's getting that real shot to be the starter. And I think it's a situation where I thought he really deserved kind of an argument to be in that quarterback battle, but it looks like it's between Edwards and MJ Morris. But I'm not going to talk about Cameron Edge a lot because I want to keep it to guys that I think are going to kind of have an impact this year and could potentially play. And one guy in the running back room that we are kind of overshadowing is Colby McDonald. Colby McDonald last year had an awesome year for Maryland football, an unsung hero for sure for Maryland football. Some of the things he was able to do last year, some of the plays he was able to make for Maryland football. And I think that him going into his senior year, he has a chance to have a pretty solid year and have an impact in that Maryland running back room, where a lot of the talk is about Roman Hemby, and then everyone's kind of excited about Nolan Ray and what can Nolan Ray become and how good can Nolan Ray be. And I agree with a lot of that. Nolan Ray has some special traits that, honestly, Colby McDonald doesn't have. But what Colby McDonald did in some of the games last year, where he was very good. He slowed down at the end of the year, but at the beginning of the year, he looked like he was like, I was like, this kid just has to get more carries. But last year, 53 carries for 306 yards and a 5.8 average, close to 6, and 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions for 16 yards. So as a runner of the football on a carry per carry basis, he was our best running back last year. It wasn't Roman Hemby. It wasn't Antoine Littleton. It was Colby McDonald. He was our best running back. He averaged almost a full yard more than everyone else in that room. And yeah, he slowed down a bit, but at the beginning of the year, he was hot. A 6.0 average against Towson, 9.1 yards per carry against Charlotte, 7.5 against UVA, 7.6 against Michigan State, 8.6 against Northwestern. But then he kind of slowed down near the end and kind of came back down to earth, to be completely honest. But we're not talking about Colby McDonald a lot in that running back room and what he can become another year as a senior. And he was really good last year at times, and I think that he's going to get plenty of carries. It's not going to be anything extreme, but I think he'll definitely get some carries that will allow him to be in a pretty good spot, I think, in terms of what he wants to do as a player. And he's been a team player for a while at Maryland. He kind of waited his turn, and he got some time last year, and it's cool. It's cool to see what he was able to do last year, and I think he's a guy that we haven't talked about enough. Another player to me that we haven't really talked about, but could, I think, have an impact this year is Braden Wissolowski. The talented, he'll be headed into his sophomore year, but was a freshman last year. And the reason I say we don't talk about him a lot is because he was so good on the special teams last year, because he was our kick returner. And I remember against UVA, he had the kick return for a touchdown. And he's a special kind of athlete. And he's a guy that you just want to use in different ways. You just want to get him the ball in space. And you just want to find ways to get him the ball, allow him to be a playmaker. And I think that's what Braden does. And I think he's a guy that I haven't talked about very much in the receiver room, because I've been focused on Caden Prather and Ty Felton, but I've also been focused on Shalik Knotts and Octavian Smith and Ryan Manning, and I have kind of not talked about Braden Wissolowski, and he has a chance, I think, to be in that wide receiver room to play. I think for him, it was just like, how good of a wide receiver is he going to be for us? Is he a guy that can play every single down, or is he more of a gadget player where, we fake a run up the middle to Roman Hemby, throw a bubble screen out to Braden Wissolowski, and he gets a 10-yard gain, or it's like, we use Braden Wissolowski in a little toss or something like that, or end around, something like that. I didn't really know how we would use Braden Wissolowski when we recruited him, because he's just an all-around athlete, but I knew that's not a bad problem to have. You just got to figure out ways to get him the ball. But I think he's a guy that potentially we aren't talking enough about for Maryland football right now. And then I think the last guy for me on offense, and we'll the defense side of the ball another day, is Preston Howard, the tight end. I have overshadowed him from Dylan Wade, because Dylan Wade has been such a good player, and Dylan Wade has done some special things this last couple of weeks and these last couple of months for Maryland football, and the reports are that Dylan Wade is going to be a guy. But I think that we forget that how talented Preston Howard is, and Preston Howard put on some good good snaps for Maryland football last year. Maryland football ran plenty of two tight end sets, and he was always the backup, but he'd always play some. He'd always get some time with Corey Dyches, and now I guess he's the presumed starter along with Dylan Wade. And I think that Preston Howard with the 6'6" frame has a chance to do some special things next year for Maryland football. Let's talk about Chazz Lanier. Maryland misses out on Chazz Lanier, and we still have another place in the portal. What should Maryland basketball do? All right, so Maryland basketball missed out on Chazz Lanier, which was it was definitely kind of I don't want to say it was sad to me. Not a ton of people in the Maryland community were talking about it, so I actually missed it. I didn't realize until just a couple days ago, but he's been committed to Tennessee for a second now. Nothing too crazy, but for I wouldn't say about a week now. He was born in Nashville, Tennessee, so it's okay, that kind of makes sense for him to want to go back to Tennessee. But just for a quick refresher for those who don't remember, but Chazz Lanier is one of our top targets in the transfer portal for our last spot for Maryland basketball. Averaged 9.7 points per game last year for North Florida. Was a really good player last year, could do everything well. And I thought if we got him, we had a chance to be a top team in the country right off the bat next year. I thought we had a chance to do some special things if we were able to land Chazz Lanier, but it looks like we weren't able to land Chazz Lanier, and he's decided to go to Tennessee. And I can't really be upset. We've gotten just about everybody I've wanted in the portal, I would say. And so we can't get everybody. But I really did think that Chazz Lanier was going to be able to elevate us. And I think that him and Jacoby Gillespie next to each other in the Maryland backcourt potentially could have been kind of scary for a lot of the Big Ten. And I don't think a lot of people in the Big Ten wanted to see that and didn't want to see Maryland basketball have that. But it looks like we won't have that. So a lot of people in the Big Ten won't have to worry about that. And he was one of the top-ranked players in the portal, and it looked like it was between Kentucky, Tennessee, and Maryland. And I was pretty confident he had a connection with Jacoby Gillespie, and he seemed like Maryland was up there. But Tennessee being where he's from, it does make sense for him to want to go back to Tennessee. But now it's what does Maryland do? And I honestly don't really know what's happening, what's going on. There were some players that they had on their list, but I don't know if we're going to get the same type of impact player that we were going to get in Chazz Lanier. I really have no idea what they're thinking now. It seems like the basketball portal has slowed down a little bit, specifically for Maryland basketball. We were really hot to start, but now it's kind of we have one more spot, and they're probably going to take a while to kind of figure out who fills that spot in the best for Maryland basketball. But I think that it does kind of suck that we missed out on Chazz Lanier. I just thought it was going to take us to the next step. I still think we have a really good team going into next year, especially compared to what we had last year. And even though I thought last year's team was good, and hopefully the same thing doesn't happen with this year's team, but last year's team, there was a lot of holes and it ended up being pretty bad. And it was really dependent on Jameer Young. I think this team's a lot more balanced. I think this team has a lot more guys that can get it done and has a lot more shooting for sure, which we were one of the worst shooting teams in the Big Ten last year. And so we're looking at the roster right now. It looks pretty good. It looks like it has some depth along the backcourt. We might have the best front court in all of college basketball. And now I'm looking at what do we want to add. And we look solid at guard for sure, but I think adding a 3 or a 2 or someone in that mold of a wing could kind of help benefit Maryland basketball, or just another guard, I think, if they're a high-level player. If they're kind of then it's I don't know. But you got to remember, we're also getting back Chance Stevens this year as well. And there was a post that people think that Chance is going to be one of the better shooters in the Big Ten, has a chance to do that. And I'm watching him shoot on Instagram. I'm watching his stroke, and I'm this stroke is clean. Maryland could have used this last year, but of course he was injured the entire year and it's out for the season. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying you could add another guard. I think you kind of just go best player available, kind of what they do in a lot of drafts, what they talk about in the NBA, NFL draft. I don't think there's specifically a guy that is you absolutely need, especially if you get someone in the front court. They're going to be coming off the bench So I'm thinking more of a 1-2-3, but if the best player available that you can get is somebody in the front court, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I just think you look at this roster and it's like, nothing's really sticking out to me. I mean, I think another wing could definitely help, but I also think that we're like decent there. And so I'm kind of looking at it. I'm saying you kind of can go best available player, and whoever you kind of land, I think is going to be okay for me as long as there's somebody I feel like can come in. I don't want to get somebody that's kind of a raw type of player. I'd rather get somebody that has some pedigree and has played college basketball at a pretty high level. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for Maryland basketball. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.